Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for our March Caring for Creation with Southeast PA IPL Environmental Education Program. Today, our workshop is on organics and human health and why some of the people work in this field. We're thrilled to welcome Reverend Matt Lanahan from Lancaster County to talk about his work there with Zion Lutheran Church and the Wittel Farm. He'll be speaking shortly. As always, As always, we are funded for this project by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, or the PADEP. Our project advisor, Kathleen Bansky, is extremely helpful in helping us work with DEP and our partners. In southwestern Pennsylvania, we work with Ballfield Farm, Garfield Community Farm, Valley View Presbyterian Church, and the Perry Hilltop Find You Citizens Councils. In southeast Pennsylvania, we work with the First United Methodist Church of Germantown, or FUMCOG, and we're rapidly expanding our reach to all of these communities. So we hope to be bringing you this series even after our grant funding is concluded. Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light inspires and mobilizes people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on environmental justice or climate change from an ethical and a moral perspective. We do this because our present circumstances demand action. We are witnessing the loss of nature and the spread of human suffering at unprecedented levels. Our sacred texts and moral values require us to protect and to pursue justice for all creatures that we share the earth with. And our actions can engender hope, which we sorely need at these trying times. Then they can motivate change in personal and community behavior and in public policy. And thank you for being part of our network and staying true to our mission. As I mentioned earlier, today we're very pleased to work with Pastor Matt Lanahan, who is the pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Akron, PA, in North Lancaster County. Zion is a beautiful organization that is an open community of Lutheran Christians sent to worship God, follow Jesus, and serve their neighbors in this region. I will be putting links into the chat during the time that I'm not sharing the screen so that you can explore Zion. Oops, sorry, my touchpad's not working very well. As part of his mission, Pastor Matt also conducts a project at the Wittel Farm, where the purpose of this mission is to provide a place of retreat for people of all ages, a quiet and spiritual place, and to the extent possible, the farming activities to be maintained on the premises. Pastor Matt Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have access to his bio right now. So I'm going to ask Pastor Matt to talk a little bit more about himself and the work that he does at Wittel Farm as he moves forward. So I'm going to stop sharing now, Pastor Matt, and let you take over the screen share.
Kathy, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Can you all hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so you disappeared for a minute. I'm going to start sharing my screen with you all, and we'll go into my presentation. I'm going to be sharing with you this morning about an agricultural, ecological, and theological. I'm sharing with you this morning about an agricultural, ecological, and theological journey that I have been on, and I've been sharing with a community of people within and beyond my congregation. I hope you can all see my screen that I'm sharing with you now. I'm going to be talking about the Wittel Farm and the growing project that I direct and started back in 2015, 2016. But first, a little bit more background, as Kathy said. First, I want to say thank you to Pennsylvania IPL for your caring, your advocacy on behalf of the earth and on behalf of the non-human community, on which we are an interdependent part as the human community. So thank you, PA IPL, for your work and for inviting me to join you in this space today and to partner with you in our work to save the planet from the ecological destruction that is imminent and before us. To that end, I'm a Lutheran pastor. I've been serving in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania since 2001. And I've been serving my current congregation, Zion Lutheran Church in Akron, since 2005. Part of the journey with Zion Lutheran Church was to help them to develop a mission in their neighborhood that would in some way be allow the church to be of service in their community, something the congregation really had not done very well. Like many small Lutheran congregations, many small Protestant congregations, there was a worshiping community there, but they didn't really have much of a public face. If you'd asked anybody in the borough of Akron where the Lutheran Church was, I would suspect probably about 75% of the people in Akron wouldn't know where we are. And our church building has been on Main Streets for 130 years. I wanted to sort of wake up this congregation. I often quote Frederick Buechner, the Christian author, who says, "The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." And so we began to think about the hunger in the world and especially our hungry neighbors. So my congregation started a feeding ministry called Peter's Porch back in 2008. We've served thousands of meals and thousands of Lancaster County residents over the course of the last 12 years or so. And the way we've done that is we serve a monthly community breakfast, and we also have client choice groceries with non-perishable and perishable goods. We partner with a couple of egg farmers, and we also work with Central Pennsylvania Food Bank and Community Action Partnership to receive the food that we distribute. Along the way, one of the things that we've learned is that there's a tremendous gap in Lancaster County. Certainly, we know, many of us know that about 9% of Lancaster County residents are food insecure. That's about 55,000 Lancastrians that do not have the financial means necessary to support all of the dietary food needs for their household in a given month. So those households and individuals would need additional food support, and that would often come from food banks or community meals. One of the things that we learned along the way was that there is this gap, this deficiency in food relief in Lancaster County around the provision of fresh and local fruits and vegetables. In 2010, I helped to start Hunger Free Lancaster County, which is really a strategic organization that brings many collaborative partners to the table around the county who are at work in some way around food relief. And we've begun to be more strategic around how we address the food needs of our neighbors in Lancaster County, and especially those who are the most vulnerable and experience food insecurity and hunger in the county. And one of the things that came from that was a need to connect, if we could, agriculture with food relief. There was and has been for decades a substantial and significant disconnection between farming, agriculture, and food relief, which really doesn't make a lot of sense, because we know that a substantial amount of produced fruits and vegetables go to waste every year. Something like 15% I'm sorry, 40% of food that is produced in the United States is wasted and turned back over in the field. So we talked about gleaning as a possible answer to that, and working with existing growers in Lancaster County, developing relationships with growers who could then easily participate in food relief by donating their extra abundance of vegetables through food relief. Now, some of that does happen in Lancaster County, but we became a bit more innovative back in 2015. So the Wittel Farm is a property in Lancaster County, Elizabethtown. It is an 85-acre property that was entrusted to the Lutheran Church, more specifically to the Lutheran Camping Corporation of Central Pennsylvania. The Lutheran Camping Corporation is our outdoor ministry arm of the Lutheran Church in this region. And we have 3 properties, 2 of which are outdoor ministry properties that have camping facilities for year-round retreats and meetings, and also is primarily devoted to summer camping for youth. So there are week-long youth summer camping programs that happen at both of our camp facilities, at Camp Kirkenwald in Lebanon County and Camp Nawakwa in Adams County. Well, then there's the Wittel Farm. This property was entrusted to the Camping Corporation, as I said, about 35 years ago. It is an 85-acre farm, and all of which is now, since 2021, as you can see by the sign in my picture, a preserved farm with Lancaster Farmland Trust. The farmland purchased an easement to the farm, which ostensibly marks the entire property as preserved in perpetuity for farmland or agricultural use exclusively. So this land cannot be developed. We know that through the Farmland Trust, about 1,200 acres of farmland in Lancaster County is developed every year in Lancaster County. So we're losing farmland rapidly here in Lancaster. And Lancaster County is, I believe, still the 5th most productive vegetable growing county in the United States. There are about 5,000 farms in Lancaster County, about 400,000 acres of farmland, a little bit more than that. And there is a farm preservation movement here, and I would commend you to look up Lancaster Farmland Trust to learn more about the work that they do. So the farm was preserved in 2021. But back in 2015, I, in my relationship with the Camping Corporation, proposed to them that we would begin a growing project. The idea was that we would begin to utilize a portion of the farmland to grow vegetables for food relief. I have a family background in vegetable farming, but we were a conventional farming system in a conventional tillage and spraying system in central New York. My family farm is no longer in the family. But I wanted to think about utilizing this farmland for really two purposes. One was to grow fresh fruits and vegetables in a sustainable and organic way, in order to provide the freshest and the healthiest, most nutritious vegetables we could offer to neighbors in the community who were in need. And two, I wanted to create a space for people to reconnect with the land, to redevelop a relationship with the soil, with the trees, with the waterway, the stream that flows through our property, to reconnect with the animals, the creatures that are also part of our ecology here, our ecosystem, and to reconnect with the seasonal process that we experience in agriculture of emergence, planting, growing, fruitfulness, and dying. And that process, that annual seasonal process, is essential to understanding life and really to understanding the planet and how the earth works. And I think we've lost this connection. After 10,000 years of agriculture, the majority of Americans have no relationship with the land or farming whatsoever. Less than 2% of Americans are actually farming land at this point. That means that the other 98% of us are dependent. Our food sources, we've externalized our food sources. So it's not only people in the community who do not have the financial resources to pay for groceries that are food insecure. All of us who are no longer connected in any kind of agricultural way to the practice and process of production of food, we are also food insecure. We are food dependent on sources that are vulnerable. And we know that in the present ecological crisis, global ecological crisis, agriculture is in danger because soils are in danger around the world because of desertification, because of tillage and overusage of soils. And so some soil agronomists actually suggest that we may only have about 60 harvests left on the planet. So the work of growing food together as a community is not just about, it's not just an extractional process whereby we are growing food to extract, to consume. But we have to find a way to redevelop the cycle, the loop of a closed ecology in which we are also putting into and putting back to the soil exactly what we take from it. And so that's also part of the learning process for us, is learning to develop a regenerative agricultural practice. We have been working with Rodale Institute. They are the gurus, the scientists and experts about regenerative practices of agriculture that is focused on practices that replenish soil health. Because we know that if we have healthy soils, we will grow healthier food, more nutritious food, and that will grow, of course, healthier bodies and healthier people that can contribute to the land. We also think that a community engaged in this practice of agriculture is essential to the future of both farming and the human community. And so we try to make sure that everything we do at the farm is done within a communal context. So therefore, it is also an educational process where we have adults and children who are working together to learn how to tend the soil, to tend to the plants, the seeds, and of course the vegetable crops that we grow. I think I mentioned before that we are a chemical-free environment. So we operate with several principles or practices. One is that we are chemical-free. We don't spray any herbicides or pesticides on any of our land that's presently under production. And right now we have about 7 acres under production, with the intention of eventually having about 20 acres under annual vegetable production. But we're moving slowly, because learning these regenerative practices and doing them well is quite challenging. And actually, you can grow a lot of food in a low acre environment when you're actually practicing these regenerative practices well, because the soil is healthy and productive. So the first thing is we don't spray any chemicals at all, which means that there have to be other ways that we address some of those environmental factors like weeds and pests. So the other thing the other part of our practice is we grow of many different varieties of vegetables, and we also grow cover crops, perennial cover crops, annual cover crops, so that the ground is covered throughout the entire growing season, even over the wintertime. So we grow winter rye, and in the spring we'll grow buckwheat and some other legume crops that will keep the ground covered. It helps to address soil erosion. Many of those crops are weed suppressing crops like rye, and also they're nitrogen fixers. So we can replenish nitrogen in a soil simply by growing these cover crops. The other thing that we know about cover crops is that cover crops are also part of a regenerative system. So let me just share a couple of notes about how the regenerative agriculture can address the carbon crisis. So we know that atmospheric carbon concentrations of carbon dioxide can be lowered through the kind of cover cropping work that we do. So soils can contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation, because sustainable management of soil resources can contribute effectively to the mitigation of climate change through carbon sequestration and reduction. So just think about the way that photosynthesis works. If you have the ground covered all the time with green plant material, you're actually drawing down carbon, and it actually sequesters carbon in the soil. It also reduces desertification processes as we continue to manage soil to increase its health. Regenerative processes actually reduce dependency on synthetic chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, as I said before, which improves human and environmental health. We know what chemicals can do to the Chesapeake Bay, to our watersheds, and so that's another reason why we are chemical free, because we are in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and we want to make sure we're caring for the waterways around us. Regenerative agriculture produces higher yields and more nutrient dense foods, helping to also alleviate the potential of the global food crisis. So we are growing foods like all kinds of spinaches and lettuces and leafy greens that are really important to a healthier, nutritious system. So let's see here. I'm going to continue my slideshow here if I can. We also, because we're growing in a chemical-free environment, we do not have an organic label per se on our foods, but every place that we deliver is aware that we're growing our vegetables in a chemical-free way. not only are we growing chemical-free and utilizing cover crops, but we're also building compost. So we are also working on composting on the farm. We started a composting initiative about 2 years ago, and that's a growing initiative on the farm to make sure that we're rebuilding the soil through a composting practice. So we take brown materials and organic materials like food waste. We're collecting food waste from a variety of sources, which is really supporting eliminating food waste from the waste stream and putting it back into the farm environment. So we do have a project where individuals and organizations can actually partner with us in collecting their food waste and bringing it to the farm. We have several organizations that are partnering with us now, collecting food waste, bringing it to the farm to utilize in our composting initiative. Another aspect of our work is that we also grow pollinator gardens. You see here some pictures where we're working with youth, young adults. We work with Millersville University. We work with Franklin and Marshall College and E-Town College and the Hershey School as well. And many of our summer campers also find their way to the farm in the summertime to learn about the regenerative agricultural practices we're utilizing on the farm, and they support the work in a variety of ways. So we often have young people on the farm. We think it's really important to get young people at the farm to have an experience on the farm that is really positive. So we're often testing the vegetables that we're growing right on the spot so that young people have an experience. One day we had 70 youth from Millersville University there harvesting green beans together, and we all stopped at the same time, and we all harvested a green bean, snapped it, and ate it fresh in the field. And it's surprising to me still how many young people have actually never in their lives harvested a vegetable and eaten it directly raw, straight from the vine. So I think those kinds of experiences are really wonderful to give to young people today. And whether or not they become farmers, not all of us are going to become farmers, but all of us, I think, have to become food producers in some way and then be in relationship with those who are producing our food. So here's just another example of some young people who were harvesting on our farm. This is another piece to our practice. We have these really beautiful pollinator gardens. So working with the Xerxes Society, we were the recipient of a 1,000 plant plug grant a couple years ago. And we planted 4 really large, beautiful, diverse, native pollinating species of plants. So several kinds of milkweeds. You can see here goldenrod and black-eyed Susans, coneflowers. There's a host of other plants here too. We promote and try to help others, assist others in developing pollinator gardens on their properties. Planting these native perennials is really a wonderful way to contribute to the ecosystem, especially to pollinating species like bees, native bees, and butterflies. Many of you have probably heard about the trouble of the rapid decline of pollinating species like the monarch population has been in rapid decline in recent history, and certainly the native bee population has been in rapid decline. One of the beautiful and wonderful stories about the Wittel Farm that has been meaningful to us has been that there is a native bee population, a bee population of cellophane bees. They're small, they look like honeybees, and they have found a home at the farm, largely because of the kind of ecosystem we've created there that has been beneficial to them. They are ground nesting bees, and they emerge every spring and build nests in the ground. And there's about a 3-week period of time in May. Well, it's just a beautiful time to be at the farm anyways. And you can stand in the midst of this this large sort of circle area where these bees are buzzing around the surface and of the grass and making nests and laying eggs. They don't sting, so it's also another experience where young people can come. Little bitty ones who are afraid of bees and bee stings can come and stand and have an experience in the natural world in which they're connecting with this bee species, this native species of bee. And we can talk about the importance of pollination. Without pollinators, we don't have food, obviously. And so on one of our milkweed plants, you can see the monarch caterpillar. We're also a monarch way station, so we track monarch activity, and we track the numbers of eggs and larvae we see throughout a growing season. We also plant a large, almost an acre of potatoes each year. And that's a major part of our harvesting effort. Here we are digging and harvesting potatoes last year during the growing season. Again, this was, I think, a camp group that came over a couple of years ago to spend an afternoon with us at the farm. And more pictures of our pollinating species. All of the vegetables that we harvest go to food relief in the county. So we work with a variety of partners throughout the county. Lancaster County Food Hub is one of our largest participants, but also Community Action Partnership, Power Packs. And this year we're developing relationships with some local congregations in the city of Lancaster, Ebenezer Baptist Church and Grace Lutheran Church, that serve community meals and provide food relief on Wednesdays to hundreds of residents in the city. So we will be having a pop-up fresh produce market at Ebenezer Baptist Church and Grace Lutheran on Wednesdays, where folks who come to receive the meal at Grace and at Ebenezer can also take home fresh vegetables from the farm every week during the growing season. So we've noticed that in the city, there are places where it's harder for people to access fresh local vegetables. So we're going to eliminate that problem and actually bring fresh vegetables directly into a neighborhood in downtown Lancaster where folks can access our fresh vegetables. We also partner with a couple of organizations that have supported us with our plants. Miller Nursery in Landisville, Cavanaugh's Perennials, which is down in Maryland, just across the border. They've also been a plant partner with us, and we receive a lot of our vegetable plants in the spring come from those two sources. We also have a small greenhouse on the property, and we'll be starting seeds in the greenhouse this week. We seed some of our own plants. And so that's another piece of the process for volunteers to come and get the experience of planting seeds that can later be actually transplanted onto the ground. And then later on can lead to harvest. So we plant a lot of kales, 3 different kinds of kales, spinaches, lettuces, broccoli, squashes. You can see here some of the kales, and there's our greenhouse, our small greenhouse. We can start about 2,500 plants in that greenhouse, which is only, I think, 8 by 16 foot size greenhouse. We not only deliver vegetables to locations, but last year we were able to install a walk-in cooler on the property. And that walk-in cooler allows us to get our fresh vegetables directly out of the heat in the summertime and directly into a cooler space that gives a much better shelf life to those fresh vegetables. I think one of the most important parts of, like I said before, one of the most important parts of our work is bringing young people to the farm and giving them an experience where they're actually connecting with the soil and with the vegetable crops themselves, and contributing in a variety of ways to the health and well-being of the planet and the health and well-being of their neighbors. Now, this is the group from Millersville University, and just by example, last summer, there were 60 of them on the farm harvesting tomatoes, and they harvested 1,500 pounds of tomatoes in 2 hours. And all of that went directly to Central Pennsylvania Food Bank for distribution. One of the obvious challenges that we experience on the farm is weeds. And we have to do a lot of work to mitigate weed production. So we do, although we are a reduced tillage and a limited soil disturbance farm, we do utilize tillage at the beginning of the growing season because that can oftentimes help to address perennial weed issues. And then we have a variety of ways that we address the weed issues throughout the growing season, usually manually. We do have a couple of mechanical options that we also utilize. And of course, cover cropping, even between rows of vegetables, does a lot to suppress weeds so that we can have a healthy harvest. So I'm going to stop sharing now, if I can, and return to the main screen here. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and see what kind of questions you might have for me about the work we're doing at the farm and how it relates to climate issues or the issue of organics today.
Pastor Matt, can I go ahead and ask one first? Maybe we'll get
Sure.
people started. You may have mentioned this, but I lost track of how many acres you have there at the Wittel Farm. It seems quite large.
So the farm is an 85-acre property, 40 of which is potential farmland at this point. Some of it is under alfalfa, and there's another farmer who mows for alfalfa hay for his own purposes. But we have about 8 acres under production right now, with the expectation that we'll eventually move toward about 20 acres of regenerative vegetable production.
Wow, those are that's a lot of acreage. I was wondering how you were able to produce so much produce. It's just beautiful produce. I don't think I've seen that much or that beautiful vegetable content for a very long time. It's just very refreshing. And it's just so wonderful to see the youth groups working with you so they learn these practices and carry that through the future. I see Helga has her hand raised, so let's go with Helga first. Thanks, Helga.
Yeah, 2 questions. One is, you obviously work with a lot of volunteers who help with harvests. How many full employees do you need? There was one question. My other is on the end of people who benefit from the produce. I mean, we have a history in this country of not eating a whole lot of vegetables, I guess. Are the habits changing? Do you see habits changing when they get good tasting produce?
Can you hear me? I lost audio for a moment. I couldn't hear the end of Helga's question.
Can you repeat that, please, Helga?
Yeah, the end was people who benefit from the produce you produce, those who are food insecure. Are they changing eating habits? Do you see any impact on health and eating habits?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first question, your first question about employees. I'm a part-time director, and I hire a couple of young people in the summertime, but that's it. We don't have any other full-time employees on the farm at this point. And throughout the growing season, we have hundreds of volunteers. So it's a pretty substantial volunteer effort. And we really do need to find a way to move toward a full-time farm manager. That would be a really important, I think, position for the future, so that we can continue to grow. I think the only way we'll be able to continue to grow is if we are able to hire a full-time manager at some point. To the second question, what we have noticed is that there is a definite, strong interest from people to receive our vegetables. So we never have trouble giving away food. And I think the only thing I would say about it is that there needs to be, and we are working on this, there needs to be education around some of the best uses of some vegetables. So for example, kohlrabi. What do you do with kohlrabi? A lot of people don't know. Or Swiss chard. We grow Swiss chard. What are they going to do with Swiss chard? And so one of the things we're going to be doing this year, actually, we're installing a large outdoor pavilion and classroom with a kitchen. And we're going to be partnering with some local chefs who will be offering farm-to-table cooking demonstrations on the farm. So what we're also hoping to do is to bring people from the community out to the farm, specifically for these little mini classes where we'll have local chefs who can teach people about the benefits of eating some of the foods that we are growing, especially some of the leafy greens, and what are the best ways that they can prepare these foods for their own use. So I don't know that on the far end, I don't have any data that would indicate whether or not we have increased health benefit from putting more produce in the food relief system. But I can only imagine that if people are taking the fresh vegetables and utilizing them, that is a benefit to their health.
That's wonderful. I'm very impressed with the hundreds of volunteers that you have, because that's one of our goals, is to increase our work in environmental justice communities, working with dense urban locations where we have urban organic farms. And it's wonderful to see your work there in Lancaster County, and the fact that people are embracing the food that you do produce. The people that I tend to reach out to in environmental justice communities, I don't intentionally reach out to this particular group, but the most attendees that I've been having lately at presentations in person and online are people over 50 or so. And I think the benefit of working with these folks is that they may have children and grandchildren that are younger, or they have children in their neighborhood that they can reach out to. Some of them even remember victory gardens or had their own gardens in the backyard when they were younger. And unfortunately, through time and the disadvantages of urban development have pushed them into a food desert type of situation. So if we can take them back to the time and place that they remember fondly and warmly from their childhood, or the lessons they learned from their grandparents and parents, they pick up on that right away. And then this regenerative idea that that you're perpetuating is fabulous, because if we keep teaching long after we're gone, these lessons will remain, and that people will just continue to pay it forward, so to speak. But it changed their own life, but also changed the lives of others. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, and you yourself. So thank you so much. Any other? Oh, I see Bill Cousins has his hand raised. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Reverend Matt, for such a wonderful presentation. Toward the end, you talked a little bit about having to till in order to reduce weed problems. And it looked like a lot of your pictures, at least when people were doing planting, there was a lot of tilled soil. And I'm wondering, can you reflect a little more on how weeds can be reduced without having to do the heavy tilling? Because that, as I understand, I'm not a regenerative agriculture expert, but my understanding is minimizing tilling is really one of the ways you keep the carbon in the soil.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Bill. Limiting soil disturbance is really important. And we would really attempt to probably disturb, if we have to, we would disturb the soil in the beginning of the growing season, largely to create a bed whereby we can plant our vegetables. But then once that has taken place, we really utilize cover cropping and manual labor, hoeing, and some, we do have a couple of smaller rototillers that we may occasionally use. I just learned about a grower who's using a different approach to preparing his beds, whereby he wouldn't necessarily be disturbing the soil. So he will cut, so growing a cover crop, and then he cuts the cover crop, he mows it, and then he takes a large piece of plastic, like greenhouse plastic, and covers the area for a day or two, and it actually kills off the soil organic matter there without harming the soil. And then he would add on the top layer, he would add a layer of compost, and then they would plant directly into the compost, direct seeding into the compost. And then over the top of that direct seeding, they would put a layer of mulch. And he's had amazing results growing, directly seeding leafy greens like spinaches and various kinds of lettuces and other direct seeded crops. We haven't tried that approach yet, but that is another way to go. And what he has experienced there is that if you do it at the right time, if the timing is right, the burn that they do when they lay the plastic over for a 24 to 48 hour period actually kills off the weed stock that may be germinating there alongside your cover crop. So, we may be attempting something like that as well. There aren't, obviously the reason why herbicides were so popular in conventional farming is because they're pretty effective at eliminating weeds, but they also eliminate the soil biome in a dangerous way, and it's really destructive to biodiversity necessary for soil health. We really want to keep soil intact, and we really want to create a layer of organic matter on the top of the soil that is continuously regenerating and replenishing the soil.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone have any other questions?
Oh, there was one in the chat about multilingual.
Yeah, Nancy raised the question, are you able to work with multilingual volunteers, and are folks who are volunteering or receiving your produce multilingual as well?
Yeah, of course, in Lancaster County especially, I mean, there's a large population of folks who are non-English speaking. There are folks there's a large Spanish speaking population in Lancaster County. Certainly there's also, because Lancaster County is home to so many immigrants and refugee populations, there are many languages spoken in Lancaster. We're not doing anything intentional right now around the welcoming of non-English speaking folks to the Wittel Farm, but certainly in our food distribution, we work with organizations that distribute to communities of folks in Lancaster who are multilingual or are non-English speaking. So working with this Spanish-speaking community, yes, we do. In fact, we do take requests for things that we grow from other communities. So we're learning to grow some vegetables that Asian communities appreciate. And also we're growing several varieties of peppers that were requested to us by Spanish-speaking, typically Latinx community members who were looking for specific types of peppers and tomatoes. So we do grow some food on the farm that is culturally appropriate or relevant to folks. I'd like to do more of that, actually, to grow foods that are culturally appropriate and would support other cultures. I wanted to grow okra last year because we had a relationship with some folks from Afghanistan, some refugees from Afghanistan, and they requested okra. But we didn't grow any last year. I may try to grow okra this year and see how it goes.
It's great to be able to appeal to different cultural groups with the varied vegetables. Yeah, so I think that's a great plan. One of our attendees, Rex Kochansky, shared some information about a book written by G.K. Chesterton. I've not read this in particular, but it's called The Outline of Sanity. And there's several chapters in The Outline of Sanity on the need for small farming, which Mr. Chesterton called the heart of America. Rex, would you like to share a little bit more about this book with us?
Oh, yes, he wrote it back in the Depression era. It was, I think, his last book, actually. And he was basically trying to show people another route than either the totalitarianisms like Hitler and Stalin that were rising up, or the kind of unregulated capitalism that had led to the Depression. And he thought the best approach was small scale, human scale things. It's very much like what you would was presented later in more detail in the book Small is Beautiful that you may have heard of. There's no connection that I'm aware of there, but very similar point of view.
Well, thanks for sharing. I'm definitely going to take a look. So I would encourage all of you to try that. I'll put a link into our upcoming notes. Do you want to say something, Pastor Matt?
Yeah, in response to that, I think it's important that we know that the work that we're doing at Wittel Farm is really part of a larger movement that I've been exploring and studying for the last maybe 5 years of faith-based small agricultural initiatives. And some of those are urban farming initiatives, but there's also permaculture initiatives. There's a farm called Plainsong Farm that's an Episcopal church expression in Michigan. They're a wonderful example. These types of agricultural practices, small scale organic agricultural practices, have emerged in the last maybe 5 to 7 years as a response by many different kinds of faith communities to the ecological crisis. And I like to think that our expression is part of that movement, that is a response to the ecological crisis, by developing a way in which we reconnect locally as a local community with the land and with the food production cycle, in an organic system that really is about the health of the entire ecosystem, from the microbes in the soil to the human community.
Definitely all connected. Before we close with a prayer, I'd love to be able to invite Rainica Weimer, who is our Southwest Pennsylvania Outreach Coordinator, to talk a little bit about the research she's performed recently on organic food, some of the health benefits and nutritional benefits. Go ahead, Rainica.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, like Kathy said, I'm Outreach Coordinator for PA IPL, and I will drop some links in the chat now just to be mindful of time. All right. Oh, wait. There we go. I recently did a little bit of research into the health benefits of organic food, and I did some reading of different nutritional journals and medical journals, and the overall consensus seems to be that health benefits are definitely likely, and even when they can't be proven yet through long-term studies, there's definitely a benefit when it comes to the reduction in exposure to pesticides and the reduction in exposure to antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And consuming more organic foods in longitudinal studies does seem to be related to reduced allergies, reduced birth defects, and reduced BMI, things like that. So I think it's really helpful to get this information out there because it can be kind of hard to find the definitive answer when you just do a simple Google search online. And I'm really happy to share this with all of you.
Thank you so much, Rainica. And thank you, Pastor Matt, for a beautiful presentation. It was wonderful to hear this glorious work that you're doing. Our missions certainly all align, and we would like to continue this work in the future. I'm going to invite you all to join me for, can't find my screen share portion there. There we go. For a closing prayer. And please note that we will be sharing Rainica's links and links about the Wittel Farm with you as we send out the video in the near future. It usually takes us about a week or to 2 weeks to bring that together. I chose today a closing reflection from the Blessing of the Herbs, which is a Catholic blessing typically presented at the Feast of the Assumption, which is in August. Unfortunately, we're in March, but I thought since we were talking about organic edibles, this would be an appropriate selection. Almighty, eternal God, by thy word, thou hast created heaven, earth, and the sea, all things visible and invisible out of nothing. Thou hast ordained that the earth bring forth plants and trees for the use of men and animals. Thou hast decreed that each germinate according to its nature and bring forth fruit in due time. And thou hast decreed that these plants should serve not only as food, but as medicine in time of sickness. We humbly pray with heart and tongue that thou wouldst bless these various herbs and plants, and in thy mercy, grant a new blessing upon those powers that thou hast caused to be inherent in these plants. May they, therefore, be a protection against all sickness and tribulation when we use them for man and beast in thy name, whose glorious assumption we celebrate this day. Amen. As always, feel free to reach out to us at PA IPL at info@PAIPL. My email is outreach@PAIPL, and Rainica's is Rainica@PAIPL.org. Thank you so much for joining us today.